Welcome to the class cafe. Is this too loud or not? Yeah, we have a few more seats here in the front. They're the same price. It's not our EasyJet, so you can choose them. Although you might be out later when the cafe starts. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed the lunch. My name is Frank Oefen. I'm the founder of the Class Foundation, and I have a second professional life as the Managing Director of Community and Partnerships at the Social Hub. Some of you might know or this site or be familiar with it because in 2018 we organized our annual class conference here just around the corner. Who was there from this group? Is there anyone? Ah, there you go. So yeah. Great. Well, a lot of new faces then as well, and a big honor to be back in this fantastic innovation hub. At that time, in 2018, everything was still in the old state. Some small renovations had started, but this was one of the projects that Lisbon was very proud of bringing to the market in a time that the startup scene started to grow quickly, that a lot of digital nomads started moving to Lisbon, and that required basically a need for new kinds of spaces. So it's very beautiful to witness now this place, and as you can see around us, there's still a lot coming. It's also good, I think, that we are back in this city because it was one of the cities that was most popular for students for many years, and a place that inspired people to live the way they wanted to live, combining studies with surfing. I'm going to take my kite surfing class, my first one, this weekend, hopefully. So trying to join the Gen Z craze or the midlife crisis group on the beach as well. And it was a city that also was extremely underdeveloped in terms of the housing market. So today we will see one of the most recent projects by Livenza to show also how the housing market is offering new solutions. And what we can also do together in terms of building communities. Thanks to you, we're here. Thanks to the partners, we're here. Thanks to the sponsors, Yardi, Housing Anywhere, Flywire, and Sea Clean, to help us with this event and bringing us together. And I'll quickly take you through the agenda, so in case you haven't seen it. So we start with a short inspirational dialogue about building communities and sustainable cities. Then we have a data insight from Stuart here front, and followed by a network break, which will take place where you were before. Then we have a panel discussion and closing remarks. And after that, we go to the Livenza living site. So hopefully you can join us for all. So today we're exploring the synergy between student living, sustainability, and basically the trends that are shaping the way higher education is offered and the demand for student housing that results from that. And we're looking at the Iberian Peninsula. It's a market that has grown a lot, has seen a lot of interest, but was relatively late in terms of development if you look at the total European market, in particular following the UK. But a lot of the trends that we had witnessed in the last 20 years are now accelerated here. So we will discuss a lot about that. And we're going to focus on all aspects, from design to sustainability to the operational side. And we do this, of course, in a context of great, what is the word? Uncertainty seems a bit overused, but when we talk to each other, a lot of things are mentioned about not necessarily the demand side. There's not that much concern there, but of course we all have seen a huge increase in cost in the last couple of years, and also a growing interest from interest rates, a lot of different factors that have influenced the business case. So you will see also today, probably, or you hear today, how that works in these markets, but we really hope that in the next 12 months that there will be a new balance in the market, so we can do acquisitions and build the housing that is clearly still needed. Because Spain, for example, has a total of 1.7 million students at the moment, of which 150,000 are internationals, which As you know, that market in particular is dependent on PBSA solutions. And this current market represents a growth of 30% in the last 5-6 years. So it's a significant growth that has not been met with housing solutions yet. Portugal, a relatively large market considering its size, with almost 500,000 students, has seen even higher growth, in particular the international students that are now representing 80,000 in total, and that's a growth of 40% since 2015-16. So also there, interesting new demand in the market. The investment side, maybe I can have the slide on that one, Angad, on the... Is that on this side here? Let me see. Yeah, thank you. On the investment side, which is the next slide, you'll also see that there is a great appetite for expanding in this market. We saw around close to 1.1 billion going into the Spanish market in transaction, and here in Portugal it was over 200 million, with the largest deal represented by the acquisition of Roundhill Capital. Attractive markets, but still greatly undersupplied. When you look at the numbers in terms of beds, there's a current provision in Spain of around 114,000 beds across Spain, but an estimated potential demand of 400,000 if you look at the interest in student accommodation provided under a PBSA model. The good news is there's a much bigger pipeline, around 20,000 in Spain, of which, interestingly, also close to 60% is in Barcelona and Madrid. And so today also the panel will look into the opportunity in secondary markets and what kind of realities we meet there. In Portugal, the provision of PBSA is below the European average at this moment, with around 6,000 beds. The shortage here is estimated around 20,000 for the next 2 to 3 years. But interestingly, it's a market that has quite a large pipeline compared to the current supply. Around 8,000 beds are currently under development, including one of us in Porto, which will be our first one. So I'm very excited to meet also the people from Porto today to exchange some of our insights into the market. But again, today, not just about the real estate market, but also the lifestyle part, the operational part that is reshaping our industry, in particular also like the demand for more sustainable communities. So it's not just something from the policymakers, but it's also increasingly a demand from our investors, and of course also a great challenge given that most of us provide all-in solutions, where behavior of students has a major impact on how we achieve sustainability. So I'm very happy to start right after this the conversation on that. And then of course student well-being. Unfortunately, not just a phenomenon that required attention during COVID. We've all seen that students continue to report unhealthy levels of mental challenges. And that's something that we as service providers, as operators, are basically as people that take care of communities, are directly concerned with. And so today we will also explore that. And as you probably know, the class has conducted the first European student well-being monitor this year. We focused on all aspects of life. We've collected over 3,000 student responses that have filled in the survey, and a significant number of them were based in Portugal and Spain. So they're not necessarily Portuguese or Spanish students, but people that were living here in Spain. And we're going to publish these results just after the summer, so very exciting about that. And thank you all to those that have participated. And if you did not participate this year, please talk to us how we can already line you up, because I think the results will be extremely interesting, not just for yourself as an operator, but also for your investor, and seeing how you really make a difference for your students, of course, first of all, but also to see what the difference is between certain facilities or students that have access to certain facilities, whether it's shared rooms, but also services, because I think that's was an important case for us to make and where we can still learn a lot. So let's start with the first part. We will close later on. We will tell you about the next events. I already saw some friends from Italy here, so we're going to go to Milan after the summer. And then, of course, we're coming back to Iberia in Barcelona for our annual conference, but we'll give you those details later. So let me start with introducing Juliana and Costanza. Please join me here on stage. Juliana is responsible for operations at Nido, so great insight into actually what it takes to run communities in an efficient way, but also to create value for students. And Costanza is part of the C40 group, in particular the program focused on reinventing cities. And for those that don't know that, it's a very interesting platform because they help cities basically making sites like this available through competitions to invite groups like student housing providers to create communities that help make cities more resilient and to reuse under-leveraged sites. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
All right. So maybe to start, Juliana, with you, what do you find most, like what motivates you mostly, professionally or personally, to work with communities? How did you get involved?
Well, I started when I moved to the UK back in 2009. My first job was student accommodation, and it has been a great experience to spend time in different communities. I think with an example here in Iberia, especially being a market that's so undersupplied at the moment, so we can then make a difference for the students' lives on a day-to-day basis, bringing more to the experience on site and exceeding their expectations on a daily basis.
Yeah. And personally, you don't mind being in this city as well, I understand.
I love it. It's my second home.
It's your second home?
Yeah.
Wow.
Especially being from Brazil, I think, for me, I really feel at home here.
Yeah. No, wonderful. Costanza, for you, what's the connection with students in your daily work, and why did you choose this?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. I'm very happy to be here. Well, I was a student not so long ago. I was a student in London, which is a very costly city, as you might know, and I lived in first person the struggle of being in an expensive city and try to make my studies and create my career and my future. So I think also from that, the passion of working with students came. And definitely, when I was a student, I was so interested in collaborating and try to have first-hand experience with, in my case, I'm passionate about cities and urban development. So I really saw that for me, it was super important to be connected with decision makers at the city level. And to feel that I was part of a change, and I was taking part in the urgent change that we need in cities nowadays. We need to build cities in a sustainable way that is more resilient for communities and the environment. So I felt that I wanted to be part of it. So in my job now, and Frank, you mentioned a little bit about C40 cities, and I think probably many of you don't know who C40 Cities is, or probably some know, but it's really a network of cities, a network of mayors. We work with about 100 world-leading cities worldwide. We are an international NGO, and our key role is to support mayors, decision makers in combat the climate crisis and create more resilient cities. And through that, I collaborate with students, bringing students into the dialogue and make them work together with our mayors and city officials to really reshape urban design.
Yeah,
so,
great. And if you think of that in the context of what you said, like what is the most important success factors for you, Juliana? What is really your When, when, when do you have success?
I think it's when we receive really good feedback from our tenants and we make a difference in their lives at the time at university, because it's not an easy time.
No.
And we do receive a lot of international students. You know, I've been an international in a different city. It can be quite lonely and challenging. So having the ability to shape our residents to make sure that they become their home away from home and receiving that good feedback, making sure that we made a change and a good impact in their lives is what I'm really passionate about. And that's when I know you're successful.
Nice, yeah. To provide a second home for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It is important.
Yeah. How many students are in your operations at the moment?
In total at Nido, we are over 6,000 at the moment.
6,000?
Yeah.
Over how many markets?
Currently we do Denmark, Portugal, Spain, Ireland, the UK, and we are coming back to the Netherlands.
Oh, you're going back to the Netherlands. Yeah.
It's going to be
nice.
one of my babies, so I'm very excited about that.
Oh, good, good, good. And how many of them are in Portugal and Spain?
8.
8.
So 8 at the moment, with the acquisitions, as you mentioned, from
Yeah.
Smart Studios last year. So
Yeah.
we have now 8 assets in different cities. So in Madrid, Lisbon, Porto, and Seville.
Yeah. And is it more difficult to provide a second home for people in those different markets? Do you see that your student communities respond differently?
Not necessarily. I think the key is to listen to their feedback.
Yeah.
And work with something that's tailored to each market, each site, because it is different, and provide then that sense within our residences.
Yeah, yeah. Now I remember one of the first companies from which was run by an Irish PBSA leader in the beginning said when he went into Spain, he said like, yeah, I have to provide, you know, food from the morning to the evening and all these like new things. Is that also what you do? You adapt the Nido model?
Yes, we had to adapt the Nido models to the market and to make sure that it was fit for purpose for the residents and the communities that we're building there.
Yeah, nice. Well, we'll talk more about the operational challenges there, but for you and maybe for your colleagues at C40 on Re-Atlantic City, what means success today?
Yeah, and echoing actually what Juliana said, I really think success is the collaboration, no? So being able to bring students, the community in the design of the housing, of the places that you create, because in the end you have to cater for local communities and residents. So I really think success is a fruitful collaboration between, of course, city governments, so really the public sector, private actors that participate in the development of the spaces that we live, and the community, with youth and students being part of it. So I think the creation of a space where all these different voices can come and say their opinion and help shaping the design of what we want, I think it's success. And I believe that cities for the past century have been very, car-oriented, and the way the development of cities was, based on this urban sprawl and car-oriented areas, while I think success is putting people at the center, putting students and young people that in the end are the designers of the cities of tomorrow. The next generation of professionals are the students of today. So I think we need to put these people at the center and really try to focus on designing cities and spaces that are catered for people's needs. And now the concept, for instance, of the 50-minute city it gained a lot of momentum and traction, and I think that is key of a successful project, that even a housing project, being able to propose on one side a mix of services and uses that also foster a behavioral change in terms of how do we make our habits more sustainable. So, for instance, the lunch that we had today was a vegetarian lunch. So how can we cater, can we produce or source food locally and offer these services there? Can we innovate in the way, in the materials that we use for the building? Can we innovate in the services that we propose? So, yeah, I think that is success for me. So really places that are people-centered and the collaboration between actors.
I think that's really interesting because also, I mean, I don't know if everyone knows the concept of 15-minute city.
Maybe I can expand. So this concept in reality, it's not a new one. So from the past centuries and past urbanists like Jane Jacobs or Jangel talked already about it. And now Carlos Moreno especially, this great mind, is bringing the concept again to life. And especially after the COVID pandemic, I think we all realized the need of having access to services close to our home, and not to drive a long way to get to work or for healthcare, for our daily needs, for studying.
Yeah.
So really the idea is to create in cities polycentric neighborhoods that have complete services, so complete neighborhoods and have different centers in the city.
Yeah.
And
I think that's very interesting because the student accommodation, I mean, I remember from my urban planning background that artists and students were often identified as the leaders in, you know, setting up new neighborhoods, etc. It's nice to hear that it's also something that you raise awareness of in terms of with the city leads. But just to understand for this audience as well, so you're setting up competitions around sites, and then you invite the community like this to compete based on ideas, or how does it work?
Thank you for the question. And yes, so the Reinventing Cities program is engaging many cities worldwide from all the regions. I have also collaborated, and I'm collaborating with cities in Iberia like Madrid, Barcelona, and Lisbon. And we have different kinds of urban competitions, and really the idea is to bring stakeholders in the dialogue and in reimagining urban spaces. So we have one competition that is dedicated to students. I don't know if we can show.
Yeah.
There should be.
There are a few examples, Sarah. Yeah.
One image. Okay, this, for instance, is an example of a student competition in Barcelona. So what we did, and Barcelona, I don't know if you're, it goes in line with the 50-minute city model. Their approach is called super block. So really their idea is to create blocks of neighborhoods that are complete with services. So what we did there is identify an area, which is quite an industrial area. It's called 22 at Innovation District. And we called university students and community internationally to reimagine with the city the space to make it more green, more thriving, and for communities. And they come up with design, with solutions and ideas that cater to their vision of what a city looks like, that then the city takes on board. And some of the cities implement a few of the ideas from the students, and they continue the collaboration. And then the other side of it, and we also have actually a site in Lisbon. I don't know if it's here, maybe it's before, but we are currently doing a student competition in Lisbon, in Muraria. I don't know if people here are aware of Muraria. I see some nods. So it's the historical neighborhood of the city, and is how do you work with historical fabric, and how do you change the neighborhood to make it more inclusive for community and not just cater to tourists.
Yeah.
And then maybe the last part of Reinventing Cities is the engagement of professionals, so like you and many operators that we have here. And I just want to bring one example that for me is success.
Yeah.
So this is a project, you see here the rendering. It's in Madrid, and it's in Vallecas, so it's in the south of Madrid. I also see some nods, and it's where there is the South Campus of Polytechnic University of Madrid, and we launched a competition on an industrial site and parcels. There was also an old building there, and it was property of the university, and this competition was for professionals, architects, developers, operators, to come up with a solution to make this area more livable for student community. And the project that came out, and I think we have some of the operators in the room because Unexum is the developer and they're collaborating with GSH and Hugo. So maybe someone in the room knows about this project. The idea is to create a very sustainable student hub. It's all made of CLT and wood. You can see the focus on biodiversity. There will be more than 300 student beds and units, and the idea is to mix also with services and amenities.
Yeah.
So I think this is a very successful.
Great example. Yeah, this is the.
This is the Lisbon.
Yeah, yeah. So you invite groups like the community here. If people are dealing with cities, are they also able to invite you to help with examples? Yeah, okay.
Of course, you're welcome to. I mean, I'm here to chat, and we want always to expand to new cities. I mentioned a few here with work with the student competition with 30 cities globally, from New Orleans to Chengdu, and with the professional one with 20 up to now. But we are interested, of course, to to have more, definitely.
Well, thank you for the invitation. Do you use, Juliana, in your model, do you work a lot with students in creating services? Because, you know, as operators, we face a big challenge, especially now with rising energy costs and rising temperatures. I think those that came from Sevilla are happy to be here today in this slightly more moderate temperature.
So we do have to work with our students because I think this is one of the biggest puzzles to solve in this whole thing. We are trying to use technology to use more energy more efficient. But what we need is the collaboration from our tenants. So we have our Needle app where we use that to communicate with them, to promote campaigns, but also to do simple reminders sometimes, as in, you know, summer is here, remember to turn off your heating, to open your windows and so on. And we are quite lucky that we work with a generation that is more in tune with the impact in the world. But even though like that, behavioral change is certainly a big thing, as you mentioned at the beginning of the welcome talk, and it is something that we are currently working with our tenants.
Do you find, and what do you find most successful or most challenging there?
I think the most challenging part is this behavioral change, especially when you have all-inclusive rents. Sometimes it's very easy for people to forget that
It's me or you?
I don't know if it's me or you. Sometimes it's challenging because people can be a little bit complacent in terms of our own attitude on a day-to-day basis. So I think through these awareness campaigns, and also we are now working. We're working with a tech company for us to be able to measure our utility consumption, and then total. Per unit. And what we're trying to do, hopefully, is a little bit ambitious, but until the end of the year, is to be able to reduce our carbon emission in percentage by creating this behavioral change together with our students, but also understanding what we're actually consuming. Because if you don't have individual meters in the rooms, it's a little bit difficult. So what we're working with this company now is to fit the sensors for us to be able to then be aware and then work together with our tenants to create this behavioral change.
And these individual meters, do you implement them now in your new project? I mean, have you changed already things for your pipeline?
Yes, so we are definitely changing quite a lot for our newest projects.
Okay.
So in countries like the Netherlands and Denmark, they're already in place. And then our newest projects in Spain, we are also implementing them now. And we're working with solutions and suppliers to try and do presence detection. But instead of using a card which is not that friendly because of the plastic, we're trying to connect the sensors into the deadbolt. So in essence, what we're trying to do is to use creative ideas and initiatives to then be able to implement this in our buildings.
But not in the pricing yet. Still people pay.
Still the same,
Still the same, yeah. Right. And one of the things that, of course, is also very exciting as a development is that the investors are also asking more impact.
Yes.
Have you added more variables to your ESG reporting? Is that
yes, we have.
Is it easy?
We're quite lucky in a way because our owner is Round Hill Capital together with CPP. So in essence, we currently have a partner that understands ESG and have that at the heart of everything that they do. So it makes implementing these initiatives a lot easier for us. I think the challenge that we face, and it's probably similar to everyone in the room here, is having our ESG initiatives matching our business plans.
Yeah. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, let's face it, guys. It's not cheap to be green.
Yeah, it's not cheap to be green.
It's not cheap to be green, and
it's also not cheap to be not green.
Yes, and in some, I think in some countries it's a little bit harder than others. So I'll give you a simple example. We're trying to work on a uniform project, so we contacted the company to do sustainable clothing.
Yeah.
And we embarked on this journey, which was actually led by somebody that's right here in this room. But then when we went to actually purchase, because our teams are not that big, we couldn't because there was minimum quantities. So it's a few barriers that you face on a day-to-day basis to be able to then think and implement more sustainable ideas.
Yeah. I find it also particularly interesting how difficult it is with upgrading your assets, right?
Oh
when
my
you have
God.
built them according to other understandings. And
Retrofit items is
Yeah.
so challenging.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and that business case hasn't become easier. If you think of the C40, are you contributing also to your stakeholders on the ESG part? Like, for example, the impact you have on communities, is that something that you have interesting examples from as well? Yeah.
Definitely, and I think what we just discussed is the key issue probably is really trying to get the private sector and all the operators on board and try to make life easy for them to make green choices. Yeah. So that's a key part. And so what we try to do, of course, we work with city governments and we track their climate action and we try to make them bolder. Yeah. And so we support city governments really to create climate action plans that focus on different topics, so from transport to resource management to air quality, and we really try to push for that and monitoring the results and the impact that we have. But of course, we can't forget of the developers that are working in these cities and all the community. So, for instance, through Reinventing Cities project, exactly what we try to do is to get on board cities and to make life easier for you to create sustainable projects. So, for instance, a project like this one that I have in the back. Yeah. So what we do through these competitions, for instance, for the professional world, is that we, of course, the market price of the land, it's not the classic market price. So we try to incentivize these kind of companies to come in and create a green project, and sometimes cities just release their land for one symbolic euro. Yeah. And so I think there is a role that cities and our organization plays in trying to make the work for you easier and to make zero carbon project become the new norm. And you mentioned retrofit, and this is key. So it's not only new plots and new developments that must be built with ESG standards embedded, but it's also the retrofitting of the existing fabric and the buildings that we have. So we try to support cities and provide guidance to operators on how do you do that, how do you make buildings more efficient, and how do you use clean materials, and so we provide guidance and we do workshops and trainings on it, right, both for cities and operators. So we really try to raise the bar and try to go beyond business as usual in the way we operate in our cities.
Yeah. No, I hope really that people that were not aware of your work yet can take advantage of that.
And just one point on the monitoring, because I think that is very important. So the creation of the app that you mentioned, I think this is crucial. So we try to push for that. And for instance, in projects like the one that I saw, we try, of course, as C40 to follow up of course, on how the project goes and make sure that the KPIs are met. But you need to empower the residents, the operators of the site, through applications like the one and we have so many projects where there is a neighborhood app and everything is monitored through that, and it's super important. Yeah,
and that's actually a lot of innovation that has happened in this sector that can be applied at a larger scale, including the well-being component of it. And so it's nice and interesting to talk further about. Any very urgent questions from the room before I ask the panel for the last question? No? From what you're currently working on, what is in the Iberian market your most important lesson that you would like to share with this group? What is the moving forward? Maybe, Juliana, to start with you from the operational side and how that connects with sustainability.
I think is this work and perseverance on the behavioral change with our tenants. I think, especially in Iberia, and I would say in Spain in particular, our students come very grained from home and are learning life skills. So we do play a huge role in this, in kind of guiding them in the right direction. And I think us as operators have a huge responsibility here, because we are playing also a huge part in the academic life. So we are also, in a way, if I can be a little bit ambitious on this, we are shaping a little bit of the future, because we are supporting that, aren't we? But I think that's one of the biggest lessons for me, is working with our tenants and then be able to be part of that journey.
Great. Thank you for sharing that one. And you, Costanza?
I think key thing, we have so many great examples out there, and it's best practice sharing. So from my work with cities is how do I put in connection examples from elsewhere, also outside of the Iberia region, and how can we localize them and make sure that we follow the best principles and standards that we can do in ESG and more, and how do we use the lessons from other cities and other case studies and localize it. And I really think that working, for instance, with cities in the Iberia region and beyond, is that is crucial. Show that it is viable to create a project that it's financially viable and economically and socially, and that we can do it, and just try to localize these projects and mainstream them. So
great. Well, I really invite you to be a partner of this community, because I think indeed, although a lot of us have worked internationally, when we meet local stakeholders, the lack of knowledge, understanding, and awareness is sometimes one of the biggest barriers to have conversations around innovation or changing the planning codes, or many of the other issues that the next panel will share. So thank you so much for this moment, and hope to see you in the break talking with many of us here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if this works. Hello? Hi. And up next is Stuart. Would you need a chair, or would you like us?
Actually, can everyone see the screen? So it is quite data heavy, funnily enough. So I don't know if everyone can actually see.
We will share the
graph.
presentation straight afterwards. So if you can't see anything on the screen,
it'll just
please.
Be a lot of chatter, but don't worry. Thanks, Frank, because you pretty much covered most of my slides in your intro anyway. So all good there. Do we have a clicker of some sort, please?
Oh, you might have to wink.
Might get the wrong idea. Great. Well, so my name's Stuart. I run the European Living Sectors at Knight Frank, and great pleasure to be here and talk a bit around the Iberian market, which has seen quite a bit of evolution, I guess, over the last few years. But first of all, just to kind of touch a bit on, no presentation at the moment would be complete around just touching on kind of the strange market we find ourselves in at the moment. And fundamentally, it seems the US is doing, if we just look at the top right here, the US seems to be doing a bit of a better job in terms of the indicators of economic stress at the moment. And as you can see, we saw a bit of a peak back in April, and I'd love to say to you that right now we're all going to go on holiday and come back in August, September, and everything's all going to be fine again. But unfortunately, we've probably got a little bit of turmoil ahead of us as we start to see a few more rate increases on the horizon. But with that said, just looking at, so this is a picture of Spain total returns at the moment. The line you can see here is basically residential living sectors. So this kind of stable line in the middle here, compared to pretty much every other asset class, has performed incredibly well and will continue to do so, and has certainly seen much less of a value drop over recent years, and ultimately since we've been going through what you can see of logistics there. Now, how is that converted into transaction volume? So, as expected, transaction volumes across the board are very much down. So you can see kind of a big jump in 2022 there, which I'll touch on shortly. But 2023, just to put that into context, so across all living sectors, we've seen at H1 about a 60% drop in transaction volumes, which is not necessarily surprising to see. Student, whilst I guess operationally and fundamentally what's at the core of it, still looks incredibly attractive. I think we all ultimately know the issues that's facing the investment market that isn't just asset class specific. I also just wanted to put this slide up, which also just demonstrates how student housing compares to other sectors in terms of transaction volumes, particularly over the last 6 months of last year. And as you can see, it's way ahead of everything else. So through a few portfolio trades and other activity across the continent, it's doing incredibly well compared to other sectors. So I think we're all in the right place. It just so happens that all of us and every other sector are just struggling a bit at the moment. just breaking it down into country by country, so you've got Spain on the left here and Portugal on the right, and this is probably where I overlap with Frank a bit. So in 2022, you can see some big spike in volumes, and fundamentally they're down to kind of these portfolio trades. Coming out of COVID, there was a flurry of activity as investors were seeking stable income-producing assets in the living sectors, and student housing stood tall above the rest. And whilst when you compare the living sectors across BTR, a lot of it was development-focused. Student housing was a kind of a shining beacon. So in Spain, you saw PGGM's acquisition of Resa for about 900 million, as well as the social hub, I have to get this right, sale of their Barcelona assets as well at the same time. And then a similar theme in Portugal, so Roundhill's acquisition of Smart Studios as well, which was 200 million, so kind of the majority of the market. So you've seen these kind of big trades and big basically bumps and buy-ins into the sector. Since then, obviously, we've kind of gone a slightly different direction. And then just how's that convert into what we've seen in either yields or actual returns? So those trades coming off the back of COVID saw quite a bit of yield compression across Spain and Portugal, but fundamentally what we then saw was a complete kind of reversion back to ultimately where yields were originally before we saw those trades, and then since then moving out even further. But fundamentally here on the red and the green lines in the middle of the graph, you can see the all asset returns, and then the dots on the right are where the yields are, the current yields for Spain and Portugal are. So providing a really good spread to all other real estate assets, but also, interestingly, a good spread to build to rent as well. So coming back to those living sector targets and transactions. And then you've got the lovely leap of Euribor there, which haven't, as you can see, the other returns haven't quite caught up with. So it's quite an interesting story when we talk about stabilized completed assets, and then we start to talk about development and how ultimately you can access the sector without operational product. I think the build cost inflation isn't going to be news to anyone. I just wanted to put this up here so you can see in green on the bottom line there is Spain, and then the next one up is Portugal. So whilst we see build cost inflation starting to level off, it still has remained high, so the actual inflation's leveling off, but the costs aren't. Spain, however, has fared particularly well. I think one of the interesting points of this is then how do you access it? So developers, whilst also they're having erosion on their profit margins, fundamentally once you add into that the depreciation in value, they're just getting squeezed by both ends. So that kind of bid-ask spread, which probably is one of the more common used terms in our business of late, is still relatively strong. So that's definitely still a barrier to actually being able to kind of do deals. So it's not all doom and gloom, guys, don't worry. We've got some really good student numbers increasing. So this is the dark lines, Portugal and Spain GDP, and then you've got the trend of students. So we've got some really good student growth, demonstrating yet again the counter-cyclical demand in the sector, which I think is probably one of the reasons why we're all probably here. In terms of that growth, so on the left you've got Spain in the graph, and then the right you've got Portugal. So you can see some really decent growth there across domestic and internationals. And whilst you may feel free to compare what Frank and I are saying, I think the percentages probably work out about the same. But whilst looking at Portugal on the right, so whilst the bars don't look as aggressive, you've got over 40% increase in international students since 2015, which is phenomenal, and 16% in total students. So these markets are doing incredibly well. Iberia has been a really strong destination for students. And also, I guess one of the benefactors of Brexit is that a lot of the European students have been now focusing more in Europe. So you're welcome, guys. That's one for you. And then just drilling down even further into where some of that growth is. So, for example, Valencia has been an absolute standout market over recent years. You can see there over 30% growth. So students being attracted to not only just the growing university population there, but also the lifestyle, being by the beach, and interestingly, we've also seen a relative growth in PBSA as well there. So. Interestingly, Madrid, and just above the Spain average, Madrid at pretty much half of where Valencia growth has been. But having said so, Barcelona, Seville also, demonstrating some solid growth, but really interesting. I think it just tells the story for some of the regional cities that we've been talking about a lot recently with clients and investors, and how there's a lot of value in a lot of those regional markets. And the similar thing for Portugal. Unsurprisingly, I guess, Porto, Lisbon, relatively closely grouped, and kind of tracking in line with where Portugal is. As I guess you guys probably know, the growth in the cities, it's difficult to tell between the two, although Porto seems to be more favoured at the moment for developers and investors, but still incredibly strong. And then just looking at how how the provision breaks down aside from those growth numbers. So on the left you've got Spain, and this is the breakdown of accommodation that's existing rather than total all accommodation, so it doesn't account for private landlords, etc. So you can see with Spain basically covering about 3% in PBSA, which is really, really minimal when you compare it to the Colegios Mayores and the universities. So even though there's been about 10,000 more beds been added across 30 schemes in the market, that's still a really small proportion. Portugal, again, very similar, but a much greater provision of PBSA, so 22%, which is basically that offering has been doubled over the 2021 year. Hi. Yeah. Do you want a high five? Don't worry, we're wrapping up. And then in terms of the, so just talking about openings, so one of the interesting things, if you look at Porto and Barcelona, there's been more beds opened there than there has been in London, so one of Europe's largest markets. I guess kind of comparing like for like, obviously there's a few more planning restrictions and affordability requirements in London, but an incredibly positive message there. I think also in Barcelona, given the affordability inputs now required, and also some of the licensing requirements, that's going to be certainly kind of moving down. But certainly, again, you can see markets like Seville, Salamanca appearing towards the top of the list there. There we go. And just, I guess, touching on the Salamanca part, you can see there, so 7% of students is provided for in Salamanca, way above any of the other markets, which is super interesting when you look at, so obviously the numbers are going to be different, the actual whole numbers based on the cities, but the provision rate of 7% in Salamanca and 5% in Granada, 5% in Malaga, again, just goes to show some of this spread into the regional markets, which we're starting to see. And then, last on the list, just talking a bit. So this just covers rental profiles, which on the left-hand side you've got the ensuite, lower and higher range, and then on the right-hand side you've got studios. I think a couple of interesting things to pull out here. In the lower range studios, you've got Granada and Salamanca basically kind of leading the charge on Lisbon and Madrid, which I guess probably talks towards some of the affordability crunch that we're seeing in some of the kind of the gateway cities, but equally, understandably, in some of those gateway cities, the higher proportion for the higher range is much easier to target. And then just looking at the lower range, I guess there's a fairly decent grouping for some of those regional cities in Lisbon as opposed to Madrid. That's pretty much it from me. And have we got time for Q&A? Oh, sorry, no time for Q&A. So if anyone's got any questions, then happy to answer. Basically covered everything. Fantastic. Well, you can come and grab me afterwards if you want to. So thank you very much indeed.
That that was really interesting. Thank you very much. We are now going to take a break, so you can move back into the room that we were behind us. There is more food. I hear there's cheese, bread, cake, you know, all the good stuff. And apparently there's wine and beer. Yeah, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. So enjoy, and we'll see you back in 30 minutes.
I just want to say a huge thank you for the people that have, travelled here today as well. I obviously think Iberia is an amazing market, as we heard from Stuart about some of the statistics about how much opportunity is actually here, but also as well the operators, developers and investors that are actually developing in these cities, actually how much of an impact they have on the students' lives. Particularly if you look at Lisbon, this kind of growing market for young professionals that want to come here, they want to get their gold visa, the digital nomads, and there's a great opportunity and lifestyle. But in actual fact, there's very, very, very little quality accommodation for them. The market pressures are being pushed up in terms of rents, and it's actually, dare I say it, operators like the people we're going to speak to today, they're a little bit of the savior and grace in these markets. They're creating amazing communities, creating amazing support systems. And I think it's, it says something about these types of markets and the opportunities that are here. So I'm going to invite up on stage Pavlina, Hugo, and Christoph. And we're going to tackle some quite big challenges in our conversation. We're going to be speaking a little bit about the cities that are kind of most welcoming to the types of PBSA assets that we all love to build and operate. We're going to talk a little bit about where the challenges lie in terms of the planning departments. How actually welcoming are they? Which cities are the worst? We are going to hear that from you guys. And which cities are the best? And hopefully have some case studies about why that is the case. And then we're also going to talk about the roadblocks that central government and local governments create in creating the types of assets that we know and love. What the red tape is, what the bureaucracy is. And I think it's really interesting because Stuart mentioned, Stuart, who are you texting? Places like Valencia that have seen a 30% in student growth, actually, as Pavlina will speak about a little bit later on, actually some of the challenges that you face in building in places like Valencia. So I think it's actually interesting to see where the opportunity is, but also where the hesitation is from the local government. We're also going to speak about the escalating rents dilemma that's happening at the moment and how that's affecting our organisations. And whether this pondering question that I know we all keep coming back around to, whether we are actually going to move down a non-inclusive rent structure and what that actually means, so particularly in this type of market. And actually, is that viable and feasible for our operations? And then we're also going to hopefully identify some of the biggest trends that are happening in this market. So we're going to cover quite a lot. So I think what we might start with is a nice introduction. Pavlina, would you like to go first?
Thank you, Kilian. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. Lisbon is great. Thank you to the Class Foundation for organizing the event. So my name is Paulina Chandras. I am the COO of Livenza Living. Livenza Living is one of the biggest owners and operators of student accommodation and flexible living across Iberia. We currently own and manage 8,000 beds, both PBSA and flex living referring to hosting not just students, but also young professionals, digital nomads, anybody and everybody actually who's looking for temporary accommodation. We operate 15 assets, actually 14, and coming up with a 15th asset in Spain and 5 in Portugal. And all of these assets we have actually managed to put up in operation over a span of 5 years. Livenza in itself is a brand that exists since 2019 and has been sort of onboarding and opening assets in quite a quick rhythm over these last 3-4 years.
Sorry, guys, we're just starting a bar over here. Thank you so much, Pavlina. Hugo, would you like to go next?
Sure. So we started in 2014 as UHub, developer and operator of student residences in Portugal. And we developed over 2,000 beds in Portugal. And in the meantime, we have exited part of our portfolio to Xior, which now operates under the Xior brand. And we remain as a developer, now renamed Reventures, doing student housing, which we're still doing, and senior living. So we're developing about 700 apartments in senior living, about 2,000 beds for students. And so we are working closely with Xior on student, and on senior we'll do our own operations.
Thank you so much, Hugo. And finally, Christoph from Milestone.
Yes, so hello everyone. I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Christoph. I've been with Milestone now since 2019. Milestone in Europe is mostly known as a pan-European independent student housing operator. We currently manage around 3,200 beds. However, by the end of this year, this number will increase to almost 5,000 beds. So we have some ambitious growth plans. Okay. We have some ambitious growth plans.
Unseen.
No, so
Are we okay?
Yeah.
Good?
We manage houses in 5 countries actually, so in Austria, Germany, Netherlands, Poland, and also in Portugal. 1 house in Porto, and 2 here close to Lisbon in Cacaveus. We really love the market here for all the reasons that Stuart mentioned earlier, and we are excited to do more actually here.
Love that. Thank you very much. Okay, I just want to have another round of applause for my wonderful panelists before we start. Okay. Makes us feel good, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay, so our first question that I would like to propose firstly to Pavlina, and then hopefully you guys would like to jump in as well if you have anything to add. I wanted to add, how would you describe your experience when collaborating with kind of local governments in the Spanish and Portuguese markets? And how do they kind of welcome new developments and schemes?
So as I mentioned earlier, so Livenza through our partners, collaborators, developers has actually put in the market 8,000 beds over a span of 5 years. So obviously they were welcomed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we've been operating in a number of cities. And in that sense, I think we have been opening the market and we have been joining other PBSA operators in the market. So in terms of specifically welcoming the development, I think that what the market is slowly seeing is how modern PBSA market is actually lacking in terms of product and in terms of beds. And in that sense, there is an offer that we can actually, to which we can actually contribute. Now, having said this, of course, there are, and you mentioned it, there are some cities and there are some geographies that can be a bit more welcoming or less welcoming. However, we have not identified that as being a policy issue or a strategy issue from the side of any government per se. So I think that, to the contrary, actually, especially in Spain, there is the concept of PBSA, the concept of sort of building specific specialized student accommodation on specific land that it has the use for that, has actually been established and is now very much common with very clear rules. So in that sense, we have seen over the years a positive evolution. That means that this is a welcome change which has come across over, I guess, the last 10 to 15 years. Now, I think we're now seeing, just going maybe a little bit into the sector of flexible living, we're seeing a similar first gray area in that part. So we're seeing now some of the uncertainties that PBSA maybe had 10 or 15 years ago in having come into the flexible living part. But if we just think about PBSA, I think both Spain and Portugal have been pretty welcoming in terms of,
So you think that there's been quite an evolution and a positive reaction in terms of the zoning then, in that sense?
In terms of the zoning, in terms of setting the rules, this obviously brings more comfort when it comes to financing, which is an important part of being able to develop more. And then obviously at the time of operating and being able to put on the market your product for your final client.
Yeah, and then do you think that you're seeing then a little bit of hesitation because of the way the asset class is classified, I guess, in the planning then, because it's PBSA, as you mentioned, maybe it's seen as a maybe more short-term let. Do you think it's now starting to be seen more like a hotel? Because, there's certain governments that maybe have hesitations around building more hotels, for example. It's not seen as a residential, it's seen as a hotel, or are you not seeing that?
No, I don't think PBSA is seen as a hotel. I think it's seen as, zoning-wise at least, and more in Spain, I mean, maybe Hugo has more inputs in Portugal, but in Spain, the way it's seen is as a complementary activity to the educational service that the universities provide. So basically, you're not building residential, you're not building a hotel, you are actually supporting the service that the university provides. And you are not putting more burden on the residential market because these moving students have a specific place to stay, and as they are recurrent, obviously your operation makes sense. But on the other hand, residential stays relevant for the local population.
As it should be.
As it should be.
As it should be.
And accessible, right?
Yeah, so how about from a Portugal's perspective then?
So from a Portugal perspective, I would differentiate into central government and local authorities, okay? So I think from a central government perspective, over the years, maybe because it's a left-wing government, there was this idea that the private operators were not catering to the needs of the common average Portuguese citizen. And so there's been a big focus on development within the state. So all the funds coming from the EU were redirected to the public universities. So we were approached by universities, and the rules they created were pretty much made it impossible for any private operator to actually participate in those tenders. And so the idea that it's not the private but the public sector that needs to solve the issue of affordability pretty much, I think, got established into the Portuguese government over the last few years. I think in the local governments, we hear a much more constructive approach, a much more welcoming approach, saying that obviously they count with the local operators, with the private operators to build and to cater for the needs of the students, although in a very differentiated way. So I think there you need to look at a city by city sort of view, because some cities are much more flexible than others, and some actually interpret the zoning laws in a way that make it much easier for developers to establish. For instance, Porto is much more flexible, and you've seen that by the numbers that Stuart presented. The number of new schemes that happened in Porto is not by chance. It's the fact that the municipality is much more nimble, much more flexible, much more welcoming than the Lisbon municipality, where there are other challenges, but one of them is licensing, and so I think overall it's always very sort of politically correct to say, no, we welcome a lot, student accommodation, it's great, but then on the practice, a lot of obstacles get put in the way for developers to actually put product in the market quickly. So I think, and there's pushback from the media as well. I think some of you might have seen that a new residence opened recently in Lisbon, and there was big news that the mayor opened up a residence and they picked up on the prices, and they say this is scandalous because they are charging these prices. So I think there's here a bit of a media and push and sort of society pushback against these sort of the prices that result from the development process, because at the end of the day, the price of the land, the taxes, the time, you know, it all builds up, and so and it creates this idea that we are here to exploit the poor students that don't have another option to stay. So it's a...
Yeah, I think that's a dilemma that's happening across the whole of Europe. I wanted to ask from your side, sorry, yeah, you
No, I was just wondering, because I think a big difference also between Spain and Portugal is the fact that in Spain with Reza, right, that they have been around for decades, the concept of PBSA is just, I think, also a little bit more known. This private student housing here in Portugal is still a very new concept, with starting in 2018-19. So I think this is still a process where Portugal is catching up on the awareness of the product itself, so to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Still going through that kind of educational process, I guess, and also finding out where and how they would like to establish it within their own cities as well. Like, what does that mean in terms of urban planning? What do they want their cities to look like and be connected? I wanted to ask from a Milestone's perspective then, you know, what would do you see differences? I know Milestone is a pan-European organization that you know, operates in many countries. You know, do you see any differences or similarities of opening in Portugal in terms of being welcomed?
Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of differences between the countries. One common issue is that it's never really easy, like it's never straightforward with every development project. As an operator, of course, most of those development projects we are watching from the sideline, but having spoken to our development team and having watched the processes actually, I mean, in Portugal, as Hugo mentioned, you have to differentiate already between the cities, right? There's Porto with a very modern administration, a lot of digitalization going on, and then there's Lisbon with a lot of applications, a little bit of an outdated system. Now, with looking at it across Europe, I think Lisbon is actually one of the cities that might be the toughest one. Like, it's definitely in the top 5 from our experience. But I mean, it's doable. I mean, we see schemes opening, and I mean, I'm very excited to announce that, for example, this plot that we've been looking at now in Olaias in Lisbon since 2018-19. 2 days ago, we finally got the final approvals.
Congrats.
So we can start.
Nice.
No, of course, I mean, it's a great accomplishment, but all the credit goes to the development team. Pedro and Nuno, who are in the audience, yeah, shout out. No, but we are very excited and just have to have a long breath for those projects.
So I'm going to mix it up. I'm going to ask if anybody's got any questions in terms of, you know, what's happening in terms of planning and cities, and does anybody have any questions related to this? No? None at this moment? Okay. I'm going to do this after each section so that hopefully you guys can get involved. So, yes. Use the microphone.
My question was if any of you have good experience with universities supporting you in the process.
Yes, so maybe if I jump in here. So the way we entered actually the Portuguese market was through a collaboration with the Nova Business School, and we built / operate now this scheme on the Nova campus in Cascavel. So we had a really good experience, and the universities of course understand that with good quality PBSA there's also more international students that come to the markets.
But it's also good for them as well. I think the long-term partnerships are beneficial for them as well.
So from our experience, we have had very good experiences with universities. I don't know about you guys.
I guess, again, it depends from university to university. I remember when we started back in 2014 of going and speak with the rector of the University of Lisbon about a big project they had behind the Biblioteca Nacional, the public library. And basically they are building it, at the time they were considering involving private operators, but how many years later, so, 8 or 9 years later, they are doing it by themselves, and they didn't involve the operators. They just did a public tender. And so I think within public universities, there's still very much the spirit of developing yourself, catering for the social, the social housing needs, the social student. But I think the private universities are starting to open up to this idea. I was just contacted this week by one university that wanted to discuss a new resident. So I think slowly we'll get there.
I'm just trying to mentally think where I think no, we haven't really had the experience. But of course, you mentioned Ressa before. So Ressa did grow so much back when they started through a lot of direct concessions from universities. So it's not unknown.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether maybe, because obviously Reza used to be owned by Greystar, whether that was why, because Greystar, had lots of nomination agreements in the UK, and maybe they used that as a maybe a framework.
I think most of their growth and all of the concessions were signed by the initial owner, the owner sort of Greystar bought from, which was Azora. Yeah. And I think they were like a Spanish, very local company that was doing these agreements.
Can I add the point, actually? I think in Nova case, for instance, most of you may have seen the tender for the residents in the FCT campus on south of the river. And so one of the things that happens a lot of time is that unrealistic tenders, right? So you put out a tender where you want a Rolls Royce and you want to pay for a Fiat or something, and they were very surprised. So they did a tender. They took 2 years to put the tender out. Then they waited for bids. No one showed up, and so they called us surprised. Wow, why didn't you put a bid? Well, because of this, that. So I think there needs to be an education process for the universities to understand what's reasonable. What's reasonable for a tender? Don't ask us to be BREEAM gold or whatever, and then want to pay a very low price. So I think there needs to be some work to be done there by all of us to make sure that universities understand that this is a true partnership. It's not just them taking our investment and wanting the best. So.
Actually, we bid for this as well, so we had the exact same experience. We were looking for the documents and we were like, this is impossible.
Yeah. I'm a massive believer that we can all win. The universities can win, the students can win, and we can win. We just need to be able to work together, be transparent, honest. I think there is a way for us to do it.
Yeah, I think it comes down to specialization. I mean, we would obviously know better how to do that and how to make that work in the same way that they know best how to teach and provide the educational service, right? So it is.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you all now then. So which is the most challenging and which has been, maybe we'll say the easiest or more easy from the markets that you have developed in? I know you mentioned Lisbon's been the hardest out of pretty much every city and country that you've developed in. So maybe which one would you...
I would also add every city in Italy, but that's a different story now. That's a different story. I think Portugal was quite straightforward for us. I mean, Cacaveos is not quite Lisbon, it's a different municipality. There they were also accommodating towards us, of course, with some minor hiccups, but yeah, that's our experience in Portugal.
And yourself?
Well, again, I only have experience in Portugal. I think Lisbon has been difficult, not only because what Christoph was saying about the digitization of the non-existence of digital processes, but also because of the swings between going from one mayorship to another. So you have one mayor, one team, and they think in one way, another mayor comes along and they think in another way. So this change of zoning sort of views, it's not even laws, makes it very difficult for us who are buying plots to actually understand where can we buy and how can we license. So I think Lisbon for sure very challenging. And then Porto, a lot easier, a lot more constructive, business oriented. The structure is a lot flatter. So in Lisbon, when you approve a project, you have to go through 6 levels of approval, while in Porto it's down to 3 more or less. So it makes it a lot quicker and easier.
I think in Portugal, yeah, we have similar experience. In Spain, I would say Barcelona, very difficult.
Okay.
And Valencia as well. So Valencia.
Any particular reason
But
for Barcelona?
I don't think it comes down to I think it comes down to probably the individuals or the civil servants, or how bureaucratic, at least in the part of Valencia, how complicated and bureaucratic and maybe difficult it is internally for them. And my impression is at least that in Valencia it's not only related to PBSA. There is an overall issue there in terms of the municipality. Barcelona has been purely very political. So within what has been all the difficulty of Barcelona, there's actually now a moratorium. We know that similar one exists in terms of hotels. They have a lot stricter interpretation in terms of anything that relates to being able to operate freely in Barcelona. Within all of that, we did manage to negotiate with the municipality in something that did make sense for us in the end. But it was and has been quite challenging, and obviously has pushed the projects back in time.
Yeah. Well, they've got a new government in place now, which is extremely pro-business. So I think that could be quite positive for new developments coming online.
Yeah, we'd need to see how that will translate into the day-to-day, but yes.
Anybody else had any challenging... No, you're more than welcome to ask a question as well, but has anybody else had any, challenging or really positive experience in terms of being welcomed by university cities that you'd like to share? God, you're all so hyper. Okay, we'll take your question then instead.
Wanted to ask about your Lisbon project, so congratulations. It sounds like from the panel, the major challenge in Lisbon is the administration and the corporate governance, but was there anything else, so from a planning point of view or a design point of view, that was a challenge, or was it really just how long it took to get a response on the stuff?
I would have to forward this question almost to our development team, but now I think it was a mixture, I would say, of everything involved. Since 2019, I mean, it has been 4 years, which is really long for a project like this. But when it comes down to the individuals, again, also in Lisbon, I think some of the individuals changed from what I've heard, and some people have been added to those municipality teams that are more open, more dynamic, and more responsive, and understand the issue of student housing, and are more willing to find solutions. And I think that's what got us over the line also at the end of the day then.
Okay, I want to move on in terms of, some of what the whole sector is facing in terms of escalating rents and what that means, and is that a challenge that's happening here in Iberia, and what does that mean in terms of operations as well in your organisations? Hugo, do you want to go first?
Sure. So obviously we've all experienced very high increases in terms of costs, not only utilities but personnel, construction costs. So there's been a huge inflation across the board. So the one that I can comment the most is on the development side. I think that has affected a lot our ability to actually put out a product that is competitive. We need to reflect on the end user the increased cost. So we were looking at the numbers the other day, and we estimated that over the last 3 years the construction costs went up 26%. So we cannot develop at the same price as we did 5 years ago when we had lower costs, and then this on top of extra costs that have been created by regulation. So when we first started building our residences, we didn't need to have a central control unit. One central control unit cost us 300,000 euros for a new residence. So suddenly, from one residence to another, it's another 300,000 euros, which someone will have to pay, which will be the end student. So I think there's a bit of a disconnect between this idea that we want lower rents for the students, but then let's increase regulations and put up taxes and still want the lower rent. So I think that's the major challenge right now. So far, from our understanding, the market has been able to adjust, so the prices have been going up, and so we've been able to pass on these costs. Our question mark is how far can this go, right? So it gets to a point where affordability, you know, when's the demand curve going to start to move lower because it just can't pay the prices. So I think price in construction has stabilized recently. I think they haven't gone down, especially because of a shortage in labor. And so I don't see any deflation happening anytime soon over the next years in terms of development.
Pavlina, anything you'd like to add to that?
I think from our perspective, we actually consider that we are very good value for money. So yes, rents have objectively been going up as costs have, as rents of residential have, as utility bills that whoever rents a normal apartment has to pay, et cetera, et cetera. So putting all of that together in our all-inclusive rate with flexible periods, contract periods, with all of the amenities, most of the time with a gym, which you would otherwise have to pay aside, et cetera, et cetera. I think putting all of that in the package does actually end up being value for money. And I think we do provide that, as we should, but we do provide that. Now, is there a part of the population, especially local population, that maybe cannot afford it? Possibly. But again, I think going back to our offer, there's also twin rooms available. Those sort of come into the game too, and we actually, and especially in Portugal, we do have quite a lot of twin rooms in the portfolio. I think they act as a way to sort of bring down the value.
Yeah. Although you did mention, didn't you, that twin rooms are becoming less and less popular, though.
It's interesting, no? I mean, on the one hand, yeah, people complain or people say that, you know, sort of PBSA is very expensive, but then they don't take up the option of twin rooms. So.
Is there an opportunity here in terms of design, maybe instead of maybe having fixed furniture, that, you know, twin rooms can be made into double rooms and then they can be split and put into twin rooms if needed, and et cetera, et cetera?
I guess there is, yeah, I think there is some way of going that way in the future. On the other hand, it's true that the product and the stock that's in the market right now is relatively new, modern, so it's not an outdated product that you would be looking to refurbish very soon.
Yeah.
But I think, yes, there is the ways of going forward, thinking in a more creative way. How can we make sort of small spaces more useful for everybody? Yeah.
Absolutely. Anything you'd like to add there?
I think now the most important points have been mentioned. It's just, you know, we as operators, we would like to think that we are in control of setting the rents and are very free in deciding that. But at the end of the day, often our hands are tied, right? So, like you said, with the construction prices, with the utility prices increasing.
That's right. It beat me before as well, don't worry.
So with the prices increasing, there's just a certain rent that you have to then charge, or the project will just not be realized. So to some degree, our hands are tied, as I mentioned, and I think then you have to just think of other solutions. So something that you see all over Europe, when the land is becoming more expensive and construction goes up, the unit sizes get smaller. So there's other ways to accommodate this issue, but in general, there's only so much influence that you have as an operator when it comes to setting rents.
Yeah, that was something I was thinking about, is whether, you know, like kind of amenity spaces eventually will end up becoming smaller as well. But I also do think that the sector in general probably needs to do a review on what amenity spaces are used and not, but that's, I think, a different story for another time. But well, okay, well, I think that quite nicely brings us on to the next question, which is, you know, this pondering question that we all keep talking about in the sector is, you know, eventually down the line, are we going to be pushed into a position where, you know, we maybe don't include all-inclusive rents. And is that something that your organisations have been thinking about, or where are the challenges if or the pros or cons towards that?
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, to some degree, to a very small degree, we are already doing it. Most of the operators have some, like let's say cleaning, for example, you have monthly cleaning included in the all-in rent, but then when you want to get it weekly, you pay more, right? So to some degree, this is already reflected. However, the bigger influence on this issue, I would see, is then on utility prices, right? But I think for utility prices, there are multiple aspects that you have to consider. So one, of course, being, would the market accept it? Like, would the students have gotten really comfortable now with the fact that they pay once a month and they pay this one rent and it's always the same? And so is the market ready? It's this one aspect, and the other aspect is the technology there, right? So from our perspective, we could not do this at the moment. I know there is technology out there and this is evolving. So eventually you can quite cheaply probably track individual utility consumption, and I think it's overall a good idea. At the moment we couldn't, like also the systems behind the curtain, right? So then making sure that the consumption is then showing up on your bill and making sure that the numbers are right and all this stuff. I think it's a direction that we will move towards in the long run, and I think also if students are aware of what they're consuming in terms of utilities, utility consumption will go down.
Yeah.
But right now we wouldn't consider it, and also if we wouldn't be the first ones to start doing it also. So.
Yeah, that's something you said, Hugo, wasn't it?
Yeah,
It was,
exactly.
We'll do it when somebody else does it.
Yeah, again, it's a market practice, right? It's very difficult. It's just like in Spain, food is included in the rent, and in Portugal isn't. So I think it's very difficult for one operator to actually change this type of sort of pricing structure. That being said, there's another obstacle, because a lot of the times the technology that Christoph was talking about is a CapEx item in the beginning. So you are making a bet that you want to do more CapEx up front because you're going to charge separate utilities down the line, but you're not sure. So are you going to take the chance of actually installing meters in all the rooms and the central tracking systems, and actually being able for your software to actually bill the students on a per monthly basis? So it's a lot of investment that has to be done up front. And if the market's not moving in that direction, will you do that investment? So I think so far.
But if you can't, I guess, influence individual behavior and consumption, is this going to be a challenge in terms of ESG, for hitting the ESG initiatives later on, or is, how is that going to look? Is it something you guys are thinking or worried about?
We are worried about it, but on the other hand, it's a little bit what Christoph said. Both of you, right? If the buildings that you have don't allow you with individual metering in the rooms to control that, right now it's very difficult to sort of go back. You hope to be able to influence behaviors more through campaigns, through your community life, let's say, approach, the way you actually try to influence your clients and make them more sensitive, and then put them on your side, not because they're going to help you save, but because they're going to see this as part of their own sort of contribution to the world, I guess.
I totally agree, and I think this is the intermediate step, right, to incentivize the students to do it by themselves. I mean, one thing that we have done is we have done an inter-house tournament, so we broke it down per bed, which house can save the most energy, and then the winning house had like a big party thrown. But another cool thing that I saw was back then it was still the student hotel in Florence. They installed those little displays in the shower. Connect to the shower head, right? And there is a little polar bear, right? It's sitting on an ice shelf. And then the longer you shower, the smaller the ice shelf gets. And then eventually the polar bear dies. So some kind of gamification that can incentivize thinking a little bit more about the consumption.
I used to work for an organisation called Unipol, and I mention them quite regularly because I used to manage buildings back in the day. And something that Unipol decided to do as an organisation was to not really commercialise the gas and electric. And what they did is every quarter they would give the statistics of where they were in somebody that were living in a space of their size, how much they use on average. And it was an all-inclusive building. And they would tell them if they were going over and how much by, and if they were going under, that we actually gave them the money back that they were going under. And that was, we found that was a really positive way to kind of influence that behavior, but it's so difficult if you're not building that into the buildings. Yeah. So a lot of the buildings that I'm talking about were either small buildings, 50 to 100 beds maximum, or they were HMOs, so housing of multiple occupancies. So I think it's a little bit easier. Is there anybody in the audience that's in their organisations that is, willing and open to talk about maybe if this is a conversation they're having in their organisations? Yeah? Yeah? Matt here.
So I'm at CA Ventures, a novel student. We're actively trialing a fair use chargeback program. You do have to have the infrastructure. I mean, that's the starting point. So we're lucky enough that most of our buildings are newer and had this CapEx put in at the front end, or we have owners that are willing to put in the retrofit with that cost later. We've been running a project all year in Leicester in the UK, actively gamifying consumption, letting residents see via an app consumption on an individualized basis, also having the dialogue and campaigns around it, to your point around trying to get behavior through campaigns. So we've sort of done it as a joined up project all the way across. And we also have buildings we've just recently gotten live with this infrastructure to be able to see it, but we've not pushed the initiative. So we're able to contrast outcomes now. We've controlled for every variable that we think we can control for across these different buildings. Some of them are identical specs, built the same year, same size units. We even look at same aspect, which way the units face, so we're controlling for solar gain. When you do all those things, it looks like you can influence 30 to 40% of consumption over the course of just 1 year by doing these things, and largely probably by getting rid of the outliers. So the people that really use huge volumes of power, you can get rid of them by either charging that back to them because they're truly, truly abusing it, or the whole curve comes down and you nudge them down just by trends. So it looks like it can be a significant mover by doing that. And we really haven't had big pushback from that initiative. The students seem to want to be engaged in that process, not opposed to being, having these discussions, and even some of the charges that we've put back on the accounts have not really been balked at. There's some tricky conversations. It's not without peril to have them, but you're talking about a tiny, tiny minority of students that are ever going to need to get to that point. We see it as a two-prong approach. Try to chop off the top end of the true abusers while nudging the whole average and median down across the building, just through the initiative generally.
Awesome. So trip to Leicester. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah. Well, anybody can come for a tour. We're happy to show you around.
Okay. We're going to move on. I wanted to ask whether you're seeing any particular trends in this market. Maybe something that's already manifested in Spain and now is starting to happen in Portugal. I think it might be quite interesting. So we'll go through. Pavlina, do you want to go first?
So twin rooms is one that we have already discussed. We're seeing, I think, we're not sure if it's still a post-COVID effect or if it's a true change in mentality, but we are seeing less uptake of twin rooms compared to single rooms. And then the other trend, I guess, which is a lot more global, and that is we're seeing definitely across the board, is we're seeing that what students are looking for is a lot more the part of the experience and the extras, and not just the room, the accommodation, the space.
It's the amenities, services.
So it's the amenities, it's the services, is your community life program, your events, how you create a community, how they get to know each other, what kind of people they can meet in your building. So they're looking a lot more at that compared to just how many square meters is going to be my room. And
I think they're willing to pay for the experience. I think that's something that is becoming more and more prominent.
I actually do think so, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that is becoming that is a trend that we're seeing across all of our assets.
Yeah. Are there any particular kind of services and amenities then that are most popular? So, for example, if you've got a building without a pool, I don't know if you do, and you've got buildings with pools, the buildings with pools, for example, go more often, or buildings with
the swimming pool is an amenity that looks nice on the web, I guess, and on the photos and Instagram and everything.
But you never get
I don't know if they,
yeah.
I don't know if they're willing to pay more for the swimming pool or not. I think that the gym seems to be a must in terms of amenities, if I would have to say yes, choose one. And then I would take it more down to the less tangible part, which is the kind of events. So we all sort of have this impression, which I guess largely is true, like students only want to party, but then at the end of the day, that's not all they want. So they are looking for facilitators, which is at the end what we are, right? Facilitators in them getting to know each other, getting away from their screens, because that's how they've sort of grown up, and sort of being able to look at other people in the eyes and actually speak and make true friends. So socialize if that doesn't really necessarily come naturally, or when they are interested in events that are coming more around, well, sustainability, social responsibility, networking, worrying about what they're going to do with their future, how they're going to professionally evolve, and having sort of events that help them out in that way. So things that sort of go beyond the, we provide you with a place to sleep and a study room to study, and goes more into those other areas.
Yeah, it's, I don't know if for those that do know, I'm actually living in Levenza at the moment in Valencia, because I couldn't find a house in Amsterdam. It's a long story, ask me later. And I tell you what, every single night, the shared kitchen area that you can book out is always booked. And my favourite one is there's these 4 lads that always have their top off, and they're really ripped, and they wear the same pinnies while they're cooking in there. And I walked past the other day, and they were like, blasting Taylor Swift and all the rest of it. And then the pool's empty, but they're all having a great time, And I love that. You can definitely, feel the sense of community and them using the spaces.
Well, another interesting experience we've had this year. So we opened our first proper, let's say, flexible accommodation project in Madrid. And we were at the beginning worried about how the 18 to 22-year-old students were going to relate with the older sort of clients. And we didn't know how many older clients we're going to have and of what age. And right now we have people living there going from 18 to 78, I guess. And they actually blend in and co-live perfectly. Yeah. They join not always the same events, but they do actually mingle up in different events. And it has absolutely been no problem.
What a Swedish vibe. Yeah, nice.
In the south of Europe.
Better weather. What about you, Hugo?
So I can comment more on the development trends. I think there's a big trend on ESG from 2 sides. From the side of the investors, so the capital, the institutional capital, more and more is looking for buildings to be certified, to have a certain percentage of own production, so produce your own energy, so more solar panels, better insulation in general. So I think all the measures that can lift you up in terms of rating and certification, and then from the student side, I think more demanding students. I think we went through a first stage in the Portuguese market where any student accommodation was great, because they were comparing with renting out a flat with old flat in the center of Lisbon. So and now they start seeing that there are different residences that, so they start, asking for comparing and seeing, well, that one has a shared kitchen to do the parties and the other doesn't. So I think more and more we're feeling the market's getting sophisticated. And also segmenting itself. So in the beginning, a student residence was just a student residence, and now you have just like the hotels, the 5-star, the 4-star, the 3-star, whatever. And I think there's room for everyone. So I think a more discerning client, a more discerning student is what we're getting these days.
Diversifying products as well then, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think what Pavlina mentioned already, when it comes to the product itself, what we are seeing is definitely a trend more toward this mixed product, right? I mean, we are being less and less strict about only allowing students. We did realize that these studios that we offer are a perfect solution for young professionals that are single, right? I mean, this is the perfect size. They have everything they need. So becoming more flexible when it comes to who you offer your product to, I think is definitely a big trend. And coming back to this discussion between Spain and Portugal, I think something that has already well established, or is already well established in Spain, is that the secondary cities, the smaller cities, are also now already quite well covered with professional PBSA providers. This is something that is about to happen here in Portugal as well. I mean, it is still tricky. Prices are very different, the price levels. It's also something you have to be you have to do your research on. I mean, it's smaller groups of students that you target. But I think it's definitely something that will happen in the next few years here in Portugal.
Well, Livencia do have products in some of the secondary markets in Portugal. How has that been?
Yeah, I mean, I guess Coimbra would probably qualify, no, as a secondary market. So our experience in Coimbra has been excellent, both in terms of how the product has been received, how our sort of the uptake has been, relationship with the university has been quite good. But of course, price point is lower, clearly lower than Lisbon and Porto. And there is still the biggest, let's say, competition right now is the existing residential market. So old-fashioned apartments being shared by a number of students, sort of sharing bedrooms. So there is, I think, probably in most of the other, I guess, secondary cities in Portugal, the picture would be similar, which is largely as well the case in Spain.
Yeah, but there could be potential for, a tightening and squeeze in those markets if there is more people entering. Is that what you're saying?
I think yes. I think so. Yeah.
Anybody else seeing any trends that maybe we've missed? Anything you'd like to add? Yeah, at the back over there. Aranima, run. Little legs, run.
Okay, I'm Elaine. I'm from Knight Frank office in Madrid. I have a question for Pavlina. Regarding your scheme in Alcobendas, as you've seen the trend that you as a flex live in space, and you've seen how it's actually opened up the market, and it's not just targeted to young people, it's also targeted older people. In the future, would you perhaps go down the line of doing even further segmentation and perhaps opening schemes that are targeted to different age ranges in the future, or do you think that will be something that you just consolidate?
I think there's a long way to go in terms of flex living right now in Spain. So I think the market is just starting. I think eventually the market will naturally go towards the trend Hugo mentioned on PBSA, or the equivalent of maybe the 543 star, but it might not be 543 star. It might be, older, younger, more student, less student, more flexible, less flexible. But I think for the moment, the product, the stock, the offer is still very much evolving. So I think we need some time to get to that. For me, the sort of the positive takeaway from this first year of operation has been that the blend actually works well and seems to be bringing value to everybody who's there. So I think that's sort of an encouraging message going forward for more investments on this front.
We have time for another question if anybody does have one. No? Okay, can I please have a huge round of applause for my wonderful panel? Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, thank you. You don't need to wait on stage, don't worry, Christoph. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to summarize, we're going to round up, and then we're going to give you guys an opportunity, to have, are we having another drink here before we leave? Before we head? No, we're not. Apparently we're not. And then what we're going to do is we're all going to head to Levensa. Hopefully you guys will all join. It is optional, but it's definitely a great opportunity. There will be food. There will be drinks on the rooftop with 360 views, I have heard. And then there will be tours of the venue itself as well. So great networking opportunity. So I'd like to invite up Frank for our closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you again.
Clapping for myself.
Thank you, darling. Yeah. No, this was remarkable. I think the insights shared are very familiar to a lot of us, but it's always good to understand that you're not the only one doing this, and that a lot of people are experimenting also with innovation, especially around the behavioral aspect. I think that was one of the things that really stood out. Also, what Juliana shared. I can't disclose how many polar bears Christoph killed during his stay in Florence, but it is effective, I can tell you. Awareness does work when it comes to good
it, so.
Exactly, yeah. So that's interesting too. One of the things that I also took away from Stuart's presentation was this great, flux in terms of the investments. It's a typical sign of an early market. I think it will also, given the amount, the size of the PBSA market, it's difficult to predict or to make any conclusions based on one transaction and then this dip, but. He might be able to share a little bit of his, crystal ball knowledge about this year or for the second half.
I think something I definitely took away here, though, is there is a real opportunity for us collectively working together to educate government. Yeah. I think that is really, and I think that we're a powerful force when we work together. As you can tell, we're all facing similar challenges. But we have a good quality product that is something that can really help these cities with the the issues that they have. And I think it's important that we understand our role in making sure that we're taken seriously. And I think that's something that.
Yeah, and even beyond that, I mean, if you saw the presentation of Costanza, some of the projects that she shared, there is such a demand, but some of the projects that she showed were, more architects driven. So. They are having a conversation with the city, but not always the people here in this room yet. So I think that's definitely an area where we can connect and team up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I want to say a huge thank you, though, just again to our sponsors. Flywire, please stand up. Give these guys a huge round of applause. Where are you? Yeah, there we are. See, Clean, please stand up at the back, guys. Give us a wave.
There you go. From Italy.
Housing Anywhere, there's loads of you, so I know we won't miss you guys. Woohoo! And Yardi.
Team Yardi.
Hey, Georgie over there. Thank you to our speakers, thank you to our community, thank you to our partners, thank you everybody, and I hope to see you all at Levensa.
Yep.
If you want to do the train with us, as in like we all go together, the walking bus, you are more than welcome. We'll congregate at the back and we'll probably leave in the next 5 to 10 minutes. So.
Yeah, and don't forget, the conference site for the Barcelona conference is live.
Oh, yes.
So people can book already tickets.
Yes.
And also, if you're interested in participating beyond, just joining, looking for partnership, more ideas, please also talk to Mel's or any of the other people in the team.
Yeah.
So we can
if
really.
If you've got an amazing scheme that we can showcase, that you guys want to talk about on stage, please come and speak to us, guys, because it's important that we share that.
And then after the summer directly, because you're probably going to be a little bit less on your email, or I hope you do, we will meet in Milan on the 6th of September.
6th of September.
Where we will discuss the Italian market. So hope to see you then.
Huge thank you, everyone.